Hello, hello, welcome back. Today we are discussing episode 41 of the Dicely campaign, Dragon Home. We are in Darokarth, Draq's hometown, and it seems like we may not be staying here super long, so Draq spends the beginning of this episode running around and catching up with some of his old friends. He drops off a couple little gifts that he's picked up for his friends along our travels, like a little bee hat that he got in New Fugalbee. He goes and gives that to his friend Ito, and then the group reconvenes and goes off to do what they really came here to do. And that is speak with the elders of this town to try to understand better, one, what's going on with the end of the world, and two, what's going on with Draq's brother. So we go and find Armash. Draq refers to him as like an uncle to him. Armash seems to be in charge of training up a lot of the warriors here, but he also has a secondary duty in being the elder keeper. Draq explains to us that there are 5 elders of this town and that their identities are a secret. Only Armash seems to know who they are, so if anyone ever wants to have a meeting with the elders, they have to go to Armash, and Armash will collect the 5 elders and then let you know that you can come meet with them. And so that's exactly what we do. We ask Armash to gather them together for us, and he tells us to wait a couple hours, and so what does our group do with a couple free hours? Go to the library. Draq kind of takes us on this little tour, but of course we are mostly drawn to the ancient scrolls that exist here. Azaria spends some time reading about the flora and fauna of this place. At the same time, Nell, Abe, and Elowin go and kind of take a look at some of the histories of this place. Elowin reads some of these ancient scrolls about the history of the migration to Darokarth, how all these people ended up here. It's actually very interesting to learn that it was about 300 years ago that some of the Dragonborn started to get visions from Vishtak, in theory. This divine message to move. They traveled following the vision's instructions, eventually meeting up with lizard folk and kobold, and finding themselves in this area that they now call Darokarth. This, along with the timeline, is very significant because it was also about 300 years ago that the Desolation came and wiped out everything on this continent other than Darokarth. So it seems, if it was in fact Vishtak that spoke to them, that Vishtak knew of this impending doom and intentionally saved his own kind. Actually very similar to what happened to the Fae, now that I think about it. Nell reads about the one day a year in Darokarth where the clouds part and the sun shines. It's a very significant celebration here in Darokarth, but along with this we also read a lot about these histories, these sightings of a village in the sky that can be seen when the clouds part. It's chalked up here as fairy tale and folklore, but from what we know from the stories that Charity told us and the visions that Azaria had at our last druid enclave, it actually may be true that there is a village in the sky here. We think that that's where the next druid enclave is. After the library, we go back to Armash. Armash tells us that the elders are ready to meet with us. And so we drop off all of our weapons and we head over to the meeting area. We're led into this circular room and there are 5 figures positioned at the back of the room. They are completely covered head to toe. They have these big shields in front of them that protect their identities and then blankets behind them as well. They speak to us in unison as we enter, which is very creepy, but also kind of cool. And Draq starts the conversation asking about Boz, his brother, who is out on this pilgrimage in theory because the elders told him to go. But the elders tell us that it was actually Boz that came to them, telling them that he had had this vision and that he needed to go and right this imbalance that was happening in the world. The elders already knew of the imbalance, and so this made sense to them, and they allowed Boz to go and do this. Unfortunately, from when we saw Boz, he's doing some pretty questionable things, and that's what Draq brings up now. The elders are perturbed by this revelation, and they tell us about this prophecy that they know of that was the reason they let Boz go in the first place. One of 2 brothers will set out to fight this imbalance, and the other will be their adversary. It seems at first that they assumed Boz would be the one to right the imbalance, but it now seems like perhaps it's actually Draq that is here to right imbalances, and that means that Boz is a problem. It seems to us that this is all interconnected. The imbalance that they're speaking about is probably also this druid problem that we're trying to solve. We convince them to at least give us blessing and help to continue our way up this mountain towards the castle in the sky. We're all starting to get very confused about what this writing on the wall that the lore keepers are talking about is, so we go and speak to Draq's friend Nava. She's one of the speakers of the village, so she takes the stories that the lore keepers transcribe from the walls and tells them to the entire tribe. We go and ask her a little bit more about how these stories end up on the walls to begin with, and she tells us that it's ancient histories carved into the walls, the people who originally traveled here, and that new stories are added to the walls as time goes on, as significant events happen. The lore keepers are interpreters, trying to take what is written on these walls and understand and rewrite into a common tongue so that everyone can understand. Nava actually takes us down into the lore keeper area. We can see the carvings into the walls themselves. Draq points out a couple interesting histories to him. There's one of his mother, Silvertongue, preventing a civil war breaking out within Darokarth. There's another of his father, Brightscale, as his father brings back food to the community during a famine. It seems like Draq's family is very well represented in these histories. Afterwards, we realize that we are going to have to move on from Darokarth very shortly, and Draq spends the day kind of moving around, connecting with old friends, saying goodbye. At the same time, Abe does some very nice paintings. Abe has done drawings in the past, but in this episode, he really leans into his artistic side. He does this amazing painting of Nell's village, and he also does an entire painting of Darokarth while we're here as well. Gideon works on his brewing, and then later, actually, he and Nell spend some time learning the flute together. There's just a lot of really fun downtime stuff that happens in this episode. Draq also goes and does some training with his group, while Eowyn and Azaria do training of their own. And Eowyn finally gets her way up to her full wizard level capacity. We know we're setting out the next day. Before we do that, Draq goes and has a little talk with his friend Nava. It seems like there is some history there. And they have a cute little chat, and then as they're leaving, once again, we call for a looking back check. And she rolls an 18, so she absolutely does look back, but not quite as hard as Naivara did when she was talking with Nell.
It's not a freaking competition!
Finally, the day comes, we say goodbye to Draq's parents, they gift us a refrigerator, and then we head out back into that blizzard. We spend 5 days hiking through this blizzard, going further north, further up now. On the 5th day, as we're hiking, Draq notices in the distance prismatic light in the shape of a bear. This aligns with the vision he saw at the beginning as we were coming into the Pearly Pass of this rainbow bear that is supposed to help guide travelers. And so we head towards the bear. We can see kind of the bear disappears into the snow. And in the same place that we saw that bear leave is now this large figure. We approach very cautiously and start to realize that that is probably a frost giant. And so we send Nell forward to talk with them, as Nell knows every language under the sun. And as she approaches him, she realizes that he is hurt. They have a conversation, and he tells her that him and his companion were attacked down below here. His companion is still down, and he asks us to help, which we agree to very enthusiastically, especially once we realize that his companion is a little wolf, little doggo, and also because having a frost giant on our side is probably a good thing right now. Honestly, if there is a frost giant community, that's probably where we want to go next. We climb down into the area where he says his companion is trapped, and as we get down there, we see this large worm burrowing and erupting from the earth. And that is where we call the end of this episode. We are just on the precipice of a good old fight, and I believe, hopefully, quite a bit of lore and story moving forward next episode as we get closer and closer to this next druid enclave. If you would like to watch this episode live with us as it airs, you can do so on twitch.tv/DicelyDND. Our next episode will be January 15th at 6 p.m. Eastern. Come, join, hang out, be merry. We love having people in chat with us. But that is all for this time, my friends. I hope you are staying happy, staying kind, and as always, remembering to play dicely. Goodbye!